About 130 years ago, in the 1870s, a man by the name of James Burne Worson lived in Leamington, Warwickshire, in England. He was a shoemaker who ran a mildly successful business. His day consisted of cleaning people's shoes, fixing people's shoes, and making new shoes. He was good at what he does, and his customers were always happy when they come to pick up their shoes. However, he had a nasty trait that most people didn't like. James loved bragging and showing off. And he also loved challenging people to do things for fun. The day was September 3, 1873. James' friend swung by his shop, and he left his assistant in charge of the shop to enjoy a day out with his friends. They were walking around the town, saying hi to people as they passed by, when one of them had an idea. Knowing James liked a good challenge, his friend challenged him to run from Leamington to Coventry, and then back again without rest. The entire journey was about 20 miles. This was not an easy task for anyone. If you were to walk, it would take you 6 hours, and if you were to run, at a pace of 7 miles per hour, it would take you approximately 4 hours to complete. Although James did not doubt his ability to complete the challenge, his friends weren't so sure. Before he was about to leave on this journey, the friend who challenged him to this difficult task stopped him. He was sure that James would just run to the countryside outside of Leamington, wait a few hours, and then run back again. There would be no way of knowing whether James actually got to Coventry, unless they went with him. This wasn't the era where they had phones or social media, and they could see whether James made it while being miles away. So, the friend suggested that they follow James on the route, from a cart wagon pulled by a horse. Everyone in the group agreed. So, with that, James began the journey. His friends followed behind him, but they kept a distance. James made it look easy. A few miles in, James was barely breaking a sweat. He never stopped to catch his breath, or asked for a sip of water. Occasionally, his friends shout a few words to tease him, but mostly to encourage him. They were following about 36 feet behind. They could see James' back clearly. When suddenly, James tripped over a rock on the ground. The road they were on wasn't properly paved. It was a surprise that it didn't happen earlier. According to James' friends, James fell head first toward the ground, but before he touched the ground, he vanished into thin air. They closed the distance between where they last saw James and where they were just a few feet behind. All three of his friends stopped the horse, got off the wagon, and started looking at the spot where James disappeared. It was just a plain piece of land, a bit uneven, a few rocks nearby. They circled the rocks that were large enough and could have flanked a body, but James was nowhere to be found. A few trees were nearby, and they looked behind the trees as well. No signs of James. One of them thought James was pulling a prank. Another one of James' friends who wasn't paying attention to James while he was running thought that James was further up the road, and they mistook James for someone else. But the two other friends were adamant that they saw what they saw. Still, just to make sure, they got on their wagons once more and started looking for James. They couldn't locate James while on their way to Coventry. Confused, because there was only one well-traveled road that takes them there, but James could not be spotted. Thinking James may have gone back home and they missed him somehow, they went back to Leamington. Upon arrival, a few curious town folks came out to greet the group of friends. They wanted to know whether James finished the challenge. All of them rushed to James' shoe store, but only one person was in the store, James' assistant. They looked for James across the town, but it soon became clear that James was missing. The three friends started telling anyone who would listen that James had disappeared right in front of their eyes. That he tripped over a rock before vanishing into thin air. Some people found it fascinating, but there were those who thought the three friends were lying. They believed that they must have done something to James, because no one would just disappear into thin air for no reason. It is simply impossible. So, the authorities arrested the three men, and they were taken in for questioning. It took a while, but the three friends were released due to insufficient evidence to prosecute them. James was never found, and his shoe store eventually closed down without him there to manage it. His three friends went on with their lives. Although they never forgot what happened that day. This story made it to the press, and theories started emerging as to what must have happened to James. Some people strongly believe that the three friends were lying. They knew what happened to James, and he definitely did not vanish into thin air. There were also some who believed that something magical had occurred that day. They proposed the idea that James may have entered the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is a hypothetical dimension that has not yet been proven to exist. It's quite unlikely that James would have entered the fourth dimension, when its existence is only a theory. Another theory involves teleportation. Could it be possible for James to teleport somewhere else? Some propose the idea that James may have accidentally entered a portal that led him into another country or time in history. Although that theory may sound impossible, quantum teleportation is possible. Scientists have been studying this subject for some time, and they have successfully transmitted information between clouds of gas atoms. Currently, we have no way of teleporting humans from one place to another, so, to suggest that James may have done so is something a bit outside the realm of what mainstream science is able to accept. Before we come up with more theories, it's worth noting that this event was first published by Ambrose Bierce, who was a journalist and storyteller in the 19th century. The account was published under the title, The Unfinished Race, in 1888. Bierce was well known for his investigation of strange occurrences in the 19th century. Although he was a storyteller, we don't know whether Bierce made up the story or if he was just doing the due responsibility as a journalist and simply reporting on what his interviewees believed happened. At the age of 71, Ambrose Bierce scheduled a trip to Mexico. Since he was a well-known writer, his trip was fairly well publicized in the community where he resided. Everyone wished him good luck, and they were there to wish him farewell on his trip. He was considered quite old by the 19th century standard at the time, and his trip did raise some concerns. Amongst the people who were waving goodbye to him was his close friend, Blanche Partington, who was a well-respected female journalist at the time. Before he left, Bierce promised Partington that he would write to her to update her on strange happenings. For a while, the letters kept arriving as promised. Bierce spoke of his adventures, where he's been, what he was up to, how he was feeling, and he also asked of Partington's updates on her life. Bierce revealed that he met Francisco Pancho Villa, a general in the Mexican Revolution. Francisco was a controversial figure by some standards. He wasn't well loved by everyone, but those who do support him had nothing but good to say about him. He was a key figure who pushed Madero to power in 1911. On December 26, 1913, Bierce picked up his typewriter once more, and he pushed out one more letter for Partington. The letters beginning and middle were as usual. He narrated his story of what he's been up to in Mexico, the people he met, the sights he's seen, the insights he gathered, and his thoughts on all that he's covered. At the end of his letter, however, he signed off by saying, "As to me, I leave here tomorrow for an unknown destination." That was the last letter Partington would receive from Bierce. And it was the last anyone has ever heard from Bierce. Partington sent multiple letters to Bierce, hoping to hear back from him once more, but she never did. Blanche Partington passed away on March 12, 1951, almost 4 decades after. She never found out what happened to her dear friend and fellow journalist, Ambrose Bierce. Under Partington and a few other family and friends' insistence, an investigation was launched into the disappearance of Bierce. A lot of Pancho Villa's close friends were questioned, but nothing significant ever come out of it. Once Bierce's disappearance was made public, many theories surfaced. One such theory was that Bierce had disappeared of his own accord. Perhaps, inspired by his literary character, James, he too had decided to disappear into thin air. This theory was strengthened by a report of him being spotted in Chihuahua, Mexico, in January 1914 the following year, about a month after the last letter was sent. Another theory claimed that Bierce had never traveled to Mexico, that it had all been a well-orchestrated lie. This theory was backed up by the fact that the last letter Partington supposedly received was never found. Partington was never able to produce the letter, as it had been lost. Instead, the only thing that held some physical evidence was a notebook from Bierce's secretary. In the notebook, There was a summary of the letter that Partington claimed she had received. The secretary claimed that there was a letter detailing the same thing that the summary in the notebook entailed, but in more elaborate wordings. However, she also claimed that the letter was never sent out. In fact, it had been destroyed before it was ever sent out. So who sent that last letter to Partington, if she did actually receive it? A few enthusiastic fans of Bierce pointed out the possibility that Bierce may have teleported, just like the character that Bierce had reported in the 1888 unfinished race. That maybe Bierce had discovered the secret to teleportation while interviewing the subjects involved with James' disappearance. This theory, of course, was not taken seriously, given how we aren't even sure if Bierce actually did interview anyone regarding James' disappearance, or if he made everything up. He was a storyteller after all. One thing we don't lack is the abundance of theories for what happened to James Worson and Ambrose Bierce. Francisco Pancho Villa was assassinated on July 20th, 1923, about 10 years after Bierce's disappearance. One of the theories pointed to the possibility that Bierce got entangled in something he shouldn't have when he was seen in Francisco Pancho Villa's circle while doing some journalism work. Perhaps someone may have taken Bierce out because they didn't like what Bierce was going to report, and the elusive message he left behind, pertaining that he was leaving for an unknown destination, may have just been a poetic way of saying that he was being adventurous and doesn't have any plans for where he may explore next. But he may not have anticipated that those words would ring true in ways he didn't intend. Who knows? There's no way to tell what actually happened to Bierce. His disappearance happened 109 years ago. All the people involved, if it was foul play, is likely long gone, and any evidence would be hard to recover. So, what do you think happened to James Worson and Ambrose Bierce? Comment down below. Thanks for watching until the end.